He cheated once, but what I found next wasn't just betrayal. It was a hidden system of lies, money, and another woman who helped him destroy me. So I decided to end everything. The city looked beautiful at night, but only from a distance. Up close, it was something else entirely. Cold glass buildings reflecting hollow lights, streets soaked in restless traffic, and people moving like shadows who had forgotten where they were going. The air always carried a mix of exhaust, rain that never fully dried, and something unspoken, something like loneliness. That was the world I lived in. My name is Alina Markham. And until that night, I used to believe my life was stable. I lived in a quiet apartment on the 12th floor of a building that overlooked the river. Every morning, sunlight would slide through my curtains in thin golden lines, falling across the kitchen counter where I used to make coffee for 2 cups instead of 1. Because I was married, or at least I thought I was. His name was Adrian Cole. To everyone else, he was charming, confident, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make it feel warmer just by existing in it. He worked in corporate consulting, always busy, always traveling, always chasing something important. And I was the woman who waited. At first, I didn't mind. I loved the structure of our life. I loved how he would kiss my forehead before leaving in the morning, how he always remembered the small things, my favorite tea, the way I liked my food slightly overcooked, the way I couldn't sleep without a dim light on. He made me feel seen. Or maybe he just made me feel controlled in a way that looked like love. I didn't notice it then. Love can look like anything when you're desperate enough to believe in it. It started with small changes. The first time I noticed something off, it was a Tuesday evening. He came home later than usual. His tie was slightly loose. His shirt smelled like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked him about it, he smiled like it was nothing. Client meeting, he said. Some of them overdo it on perfume. I laughed. I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? He was my husband. But the body always knows before the mind accepts it. That night, when he went to shower, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Once. Twice. Then stopped. I wasn't the kind of wife who checked phones. I told myself that was disrespectful, toxic, insecure behavior. But something inside me, something quiet and unfamiliar, told me to look. The screen lit up again. I miss you already. No name. Just a heart emoji. Then another message followed immediately. Next time don't stay so long at your wife's place. My breath didn't just stop. It disappeared. I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling like the floor beneath me had turned into water. My reflection in the black glass looked unfamiliar, like someone pretending to be me. The shower was still running. Steam filled the hallway. And in that moment, I had a choice. Close the phone, or open the truth. I opened it. What I found wasn't just betrayal. It was a second life. Her name was Celeste. She wasn't random. She wasn't a mistake. She was familiar. A colleague from his firm. Someone I had seen before at company dinners. Someone who had smiled at me too politely, too carefully. Their messages went back months. Then photos. Then videos. Hotel rooms. Weekend trips, he told me, were work emergencies. Promises he had made to me, repeated in different words to her. And the worst part, the softness, the intimacy, the version of him I thought was mine, he had duplicated it. I didn't cry at first. That came later. First came silence. A deep, unnatural silence that swallowed every sound in the apartment, even the running water, even my heartbeat. When he came out of the shower, towel around his neck, humming softly, he didn't notice anything wrong. "Did you eat?" he asked casually. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in 7 years, I saw a stranger living inside my home. I wasn't hungry, I said. My voice sounded normal. Too normal. That scared me more than anything else. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering how many times he had done this. How many nights he had come home from her bed and touched me with the same hands. At some point, he turned toward me in his sleep and murmured something I couldn't hear. Maybe her name. Maybe mine. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. Because something inside me had already changed. Not broken. Changed. The next morning, I woke up early. Before him. The apartment was still dark, washed in gray-blue morning light. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the coffee machine. 2 cups. I only made 1. Then I sat down and opened my laptop. and I started digging. Not emotionally, practically. I checked everything. His finances, his travel records, his shared work files. What I discovered was not just betrayal in love, but betrayal in life structure. He had moved money. Not large amounts at first. Small transfers. Carefully hidden accounts. Expenses labeled under business development and client hospitality. But the pattern was there. Clear. Intentional. Calculated. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was building an exit. And I was part of the foundation he planned to leave behind. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me too. I always thought heartbreak would look like screaming or falling apart. But mine felt like clarity. Sharp. Quiet. Dangerous. By evening, I had already made a decision. Not revenge. Not yet. Something colder. Something more patient. I needed to understand everything first. Who Celeste really was. How deep this went. And most importantly, how long I had been living inside a lie that was designed to look like love. That night, when Adrian came home again, he kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. "I missed you," he said, and I almost laughed. Because for the first time, I understood something terrifying. Men don't always cheat because they want something new. Sometimes they cheat because they think they'll never get caught. And Adrian, he had never imagined I would look closely enough. I smiled back at him. Softly. Perfectly. And I said the words that would become the beginning of his ending. "I missed you too." But inside me, something had already started planning his destruction. After that night, something changed in the apartment. Not physically. Everything still looked the same. The soft gray couch, the framed wedding photos, the neatly arranged kitchen shelves, the faint smell of Adrian's cologne lingering in the hallway. But for me, nothing felt the same anymore. It was like I had been living inside a glass box my whole life, and someone had finally cracked it. And now I could see the fractures everywhere. Adrian still behaved normally. That was the most disturbing part. He still kissed my forehead in the mornings. Still asked me if I slept well. Still talked about work stress and deadlines and clients who were impossible to please. But now I listened differently. Every word felt like a test. Every sentence felt rehearsed. And I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The way he always turned his phone face down when I entered the room. The way he smiled slightly too quickly when I asked simple questions. The way his eyes moved away from mine, just for a fraction of a second too long. Before, I called it tiredness. Now, I called it evidence. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because anger is loud, but information is powerful. And I wanted everything. So I started with her. Celeste. The name sat in my mind like a thorn. Beautiful. Foreign, deliberate. I searched her social media first. At first, it looked normal. A polished professional profile. Corporate photos. Conference appearances. Carefully curated captions about growth, leadership, and ambition. She looked like the kind of woman who didn't make mistakes. Or at least, the kind who made mistakes and cleaned them up before anyone noticed. But I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for cracks. And I found them in the smallest places. A tagged photo that was quickly deleted. A comment from a mutual colleague that disappeared a few hours later. A weekend gap in her online presence that matched exactly with Adrian's business trips. It wasn't proof, but it was alignment. And alignment is the beginning of truth. 2 days later, I did something I had never done before. I went to his office. Not to confront him. To observe. The building was exactly what I expected. Glass. Steel. Silence. The kind of corporate tower that made people feel important just by entering it. The reception smelled like expensive flowers that had no real scent. Everything was too clean. Too controlled. I signed in as a visitor. Alina Markham. Wife of Adrian Cole. The words felt strange on the screen. Like they belonged to someone else. The receptionist smiled politely and called someone to escort me upstairs. While I waited, I watched people move around the lobby. Everyone looked like they were hiding something behind their professionalism. Or maybe I had just started seeing the world differently. When I reached his floor, I saw her. Even before I was told her name. There are some people you recognize without explanation. Celeste was standing near a glass meeting room, speaking to 2 colleagues. She was exactly how I had imagined her from his messages, but also worse. Because she was real. Not pixels. Not words. Not suspicion. Real. She wore a fitted black blazer, her hair tied back neatly, her posture confident in a way that didn't ask for approval. She laughed at something one of the men said, and the sound was light, effortless. And then she turned slightly and saw me. For half a second, her expression didn't change. That told me everything. She knew who I was, or at least she knew I was important enough to notice. But then she smiled, a perfect corporate smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was calm, controlled. I studied her face carefully. There was no guilt there, no fear, just curiosity, and something colder underneath. Recognition. I felt something twist inside me. Not jealousy, not sadness, something sharper. Understanding. "I'm looking for Adrian Cole," I said. At the sound of his name, her eyes flickered. Just once. Then she nodded politely. "He's in a meeting right now." A pause. Then she added, almost casually, "You can wait in his office if you like." Her tone was helpful. Too helpful. Like she already knew I wouldn't like what I would see there. His office was on the corner. Glass walls. City view. Everything designed to look powerful. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The second life. His desk was too organized. Too empty. But the trash bin wasn't. There were coffee cups from cafes I didn't know. A receipt folded carefully and then thrown away too neatly to be accidental. And a faint scent. Not mine. Not office perfume. Something softer. More intimate. I sat down slowly in his chair. The leather was still warm. That's when I noticed the drawer. Unlocked. A mistake. Or maybe confidence. Inside, I found things that didn't belong to a single life. A second phone. No name on the screen. Just patterns. Messages deleted but not fully erased. Hotel confirmations. A handwritten note. And one photograph. It wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. It was Adrian. And Celeste. Standing too close. Smiling too naturally. In a way that didn't look like an accident. It looked like practice. My hands didn't shake. But something inside me tightened. Like a rope being slowly pulled until it was ready to snap. I left the office before anyone noticed. I walked through the building calmly, like I had simply visited a normal place. But inside me, everything was reorganizing. Not breaking. Rebuilding. When I reached outside, the air felt colder than before. The city noise returned like a wave hitting stone. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I was not just dealing with a cheating husband. I was dealing with a system. A structure. A pattern of deception that had been running long before I ever suspected anything. And I was only now being allowed to see it. That evening, Adrian came home earlier than usual. He looked relaxed. Almost happy. "Long day?" I asked softly. He nodded, loosening his tie. "You wouldn't believe the chaos in the office today," he said. I watched him carefully. Every movement. Every breath. Every lie he didn't know I could now see through. "I met someone today," I said casually. He froze for just a fraction of a second, then smiled. "Oh, who?" "Celeste," I said. The air changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for me to feel it. He turned slowly. "Why were you at my office?" My voice stayed calm. "I wanted to see where you'd disappear every day." Silence. Long. Heavy. Then he laughed softly. A controlled sound. "You should have told me. I would have shown you around properly." But his eyes weren't laughing. Not at all. They were calculating, measuring, reassessing. For the first time, I saw it clearly. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of how much I already knew. That night, I didn't sleep again. But this time, I wasn't hurt. I was awake. Completely. And somewhere in the silence of that apartment, I made a decision that would change everything that came after. I would not confront him. I would not scream. I would not break first. Instead, I would learn everything. And when the time came, I would make sure he had no version of his life left to return to. Not even the one he thought was real. After I visited his office, everything inside me stopped reacting the way it used to. Pain didn't come like before. Shock didn't come either. It was something else now, quiet awareness, like standing in a dark room and slowly learning the shape of every object inside it. Adrian didn't know it, but I had stopped being his wife in the emotional sense. I was now something else. An observer. A collector of truth. That night, he came home later than usual again. But this time, I didn't ask where he had been. I already knew the question didn't matter anymore. He kissed my cheek, loosened his tie, and walked into the kitchen like nothing had changed between us. And I watched him like I was studying a stranger who had been living in my house for years. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. Instead, I opened his world. Not his emotions, not his lies, his structure, his finances, because people think betrayal is emotional, but real betrayal is always logistical. I started from what I already had, his second phone, the receipts, the hidden office drawer. I focused on patterns. Every man leaves traces, not in words, but in repetition. And Adrian was no exception. At first, it looked like small irregularities. Transfers labeled as consultation fees, payments routed through companies that didn't have real public presence, subscriptions I had never heard of. Then I saw the pattern beneath the pattern. The money wasn't just leaving. It was going somewhere specific. One account, one name, one structure that repeated like a heartbeat beneath everything else. Celeste. But not just Celeste. A corporate entity linked to her name. A shell consultancy firm registered under a different country. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The morning light hit the screen, but I didn't blink. Because this wasn't cheating anymore. This was coordination. My hand stayed steady as I dug deeper. Every click revealed another layer. Adrian wasn't just hiding an affair. He was hiding movement of capital. Large-scale financial redirection, disguised as business expansion. And Celeste, she wasn't just a woman in the middle of it. She was part of a structure holding it together. Or maybe she was the structure. I felt something shift in my chest. Not heartbreak. Clarity. Because suddenly, everything I thought I knew about him started collapsing into a single possibility. Maybe I wasn't the betrayed wife. Maybe I was just the last person to find out what kind of man I had married. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I called someone from his world. Not him. Not Celeste. Someone beneath them. An assistant. A junior analyst named Rowan. I had seen him once at a company event. Quiet. Nervous. Always looking like he was trying not to be noticed. People like that notice everything. They just don't speak. When he answered, I kept my voice soft. Careful. I think there's something wrong with some internal transactions at Cole and Partners, I said. Silence. Then his breathing changed. Who is this? I'm someone who can protect you, I replied calmly. That was enough. Because fear opens doors faster than trust. We met in a cafe 2 blocks away from the river. It was one of those places that tried too hard to feel warm. Wooden tables, soft lighting, the smell of cinnamon and burnt espresso. He looked around 3 times before sitting down. He was nervous. Good. Nervous people tell the truth in fragments. I shouldn't be here, he said immediately. You already are, I replied. That shut him up. I didn't rush him. I let silence sit between us until it became uncomfortable enough for him to fill it. And eventually he did. They told us not to question it, he said quietly. Who? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Adrian and Celeste. My fingers tightened slightly around my cup, but I didn't react. I just watched him. They run a parallel system inside the firm, he continued. Officially, it's consulting. Unofficially, it's fund movement, offshore structuring, client money redistribution. I didn't interrupt, because if I did, I would lose the rhythm of truth. Rowan swallowed. And your husband, he's not just involved. He's one of the key operators. Key operator. The words didn't feel real. Not because I didn't understand them, but because they changed the shape of everything I had lived. 7 years of marriage, morning coffees, late-night conversations, future plans, all sitting on top of something I had never been allowed to see. A system, not a relationship. And Celeste, I asked finally. Rowan looked away. She's the compliance layer, he said. She makes everything look clean. She knows exactly how to make transactions invisible. Adrian brings in clients. She cleans the trail. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? He hesitated, then whispered something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Because people who stay silent always become part of it. When I left the cafe, the city looked different again. Not brighter, not darker, just exposed. Every building felt like it had secrets inside it. Every window looked like it was hiding something. And I finally understood something that had been building inside me since the beginning. I was not dealing with betrayal. I was inside a carefully constructed machine, and I had just learned how one part of it worked. That evening, Adrian came home unusually early. He looked tense, not angry, alert. He was watching me more closely now. I could feel it, like he was trying to measure how much I had changed. "You've been quiet," he said while pouring a drink. "I've been thinking," I replied. He nodded slowly. "About what?" I smiled faintly. "About how people live double lives without realizing the weight of both." The glass in his hand paused midair. Just for a second. Then he took a sip. "Sounds philosophical," he said lightly. But his eyes didn't match his tone. They were scanning me now, constantly, like I had become a variable in an equation he couldn't solve. Later that night, when he was asleep, I stood by the window again. The city stretched endlessly below me, lights moving like pulses, lives overlapping without ever touching. And I thought about Celeste, not as a woman, not as a rival, but as a system operator. Someone who didn't just take my husband. She helped build the world he lived inside. And now I was standing at the edge of that system, looking in, understanding how it breathed, how it survived, and most importantly, how it could collapse. I opened my laptop again, this time not to search, but to map connections, transfers, names, patterns. And as the structure slowly revealed itself across my screen, I felt something unfamiliar rise inside me. Not rage, not sadness, something colder, precision. Because now I understood the truth. Adrian's life wasn't built on love. It was built on access. And I was no longer going to be the person standing outside it. By the time I reached part 4 of Adrian's life, I stopped feeling like a wife entirely. I wasn't even sure I was still a victim. What I had become instead was something far more dangerous. A witness who understood too much. And once you understand a system, you stop fearing it. You start studying how to break it. The night after my meeting with Rowan, I couldn't sleep. Not because of sadness, but because of structure. My mind kept replaying everything he said, like puzzle pieces refusing to stay still. Celeste is the compliance layer. Adrian brings clients. She makes everything invisible. Invisible. That word stayed with me longer than anything else. Because invisibility is never natural. It is designed, and anything designed can be exposed. At 4:17 a.m. I got up. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic below. Adrian was asleep in the bedroom. The same man I had once believed I couldn't live without. Now just another variable in a system I was learning to decode. I sat in front of my laptop and opened everything again. But this time I wasn't searching. I was connecting. Hours passed. The sky outside shifted from black to gray-blue. And slowly, something started forming on my screen. A network. Not random. Not messy. A deliberate structure of money flow, fake consultancy layers, offshore accounts, and corporate shells that looped back into a single hidden core. And at the center of it all, Celeste. But not as a person. As an architecture. She wasn't just cleaning transactions. She was designing invisibility itself. And Adrian, he wasn't the mastermind. He was the bridge. When I finally stood up, my legs felt stiff. Not from exhaustion. From realization. Because I now understood something terrifyingly simple. Adrian was replaceable. But Celeste, she was not. She was the one holding the illusion together. Without her, everything would start leaking. Money. Records. Truth. That morning, I didn't act like I hadn't seen anything. I acted like I had seen nothing at all. That was the difference now. I had learned the art of silence. Adrian kissed my forehead before leaving. "You look tired," he said. "I slept fine," I replied softly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because now he was watching me differently. Not as a wife, but as a risk. After he left, I did something I hadn't done before. I stopped looking at him, and started looking at her properly. Celeste. Not through his life. Through her patterns. And patterns always reveal personality. Even when people don't. I spent the entire day digging. Not emotionally. Structurally. Company filings. Hidden partnerships. Financial fingerprints across different jurisdictions. And then I found it. The origin point. A smaller firm. Years earlier. Before Adrian. Before the current system. A consultancy started by one name. Celeste alone. But she hadn't started it as a financial structure. She started it as a recovery mechanism. And that's when everything shifted. Because her history wasn't about greed. It was about survival. I found an old archived article buried deep in a forgotten page of the internet. A photo of a younger Celeste. Different hair, different expression, but the same eyes. The article described a corporate scandal years ago, internal fraud inside a firm she used to work for. Billions mismanaged. People arrested. Lives destroyed. And Celeste, she wasn't blamed. She was the only one who survived it untouched. Because she testified, and in return, she learned how the system failed, and rebuilt it in reverse. I leaned back slowly. The room felt colder. Because suddenly I understood something Adrian never had. Celeste didn't fall into corruption. She engineered it, so she would never be a victim again. And Adrian, he was just one more man who believed he was smart enough to control her system. That evening, Adrian came home later than usual. This time, he didn't pretend to be relaxed. He looked tense, like something was already slipping out of his control. "You've been on your laptop a lot," he said casually. I smiled. "I like learning things," I replied. A pause. Then he nodded slowly. "About what?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't hide my awareness completely. "Patterns," I said softly. Something flickered in his expression. Gone instantly. But I saw it. He understood. Not everything, but enough to feel uncomfortable. That night, he didn't sleep well. I could tell. He kept turning in bed, checking his phone, leaving the room once, when he thought I was asleep. But I wasn't. I was listening. Not to him. To the system collapsing under pressure. Because systems always react before people do. And this one was starting to react. The next morning, Rowan called me again. His voice was different. More urgent. "They know someone's looking," he said. I stayed quiet. "Celeste flagged internal monitoring anomalies," he continued. "Adrian's name came up in review cycles. They're tightening access controls." I closed my eyes slowly. So it had started. Not my revenge. Not yet. But instability. "Are they scared?" I asked calmly. Rowan hesitated. "No," he said. "They're alert." A pause. Then. "And alert systems are more dangerous than scared people." After the call ended, I sat for a long time in silence. The city outside moved like nothing was happening. Cars. People. Light. Routine. But inside this apartment, everything was already changing. Slowly. Quietly. Irreversibly. That evening, I made dinner for Adrian. He noticed. "You're being thoughtful lately," he said. I smiled gently. "I've had time to think." He watched me for a second longer than usual, then sat down. We ate in silence, but it wasn't peaceful silence anymore. It was measured, controlled, like both of us were waiting for something to break first. After dinner, I placed my phone on the table. Unlocked. Screen facing upward. Adrian noticed immediately. "So you trust me now?" he asked lightly. I looked at him, and for the first time, I told him something almost true. "I stopped trusting blindly," I said. That was all. But it changed his expression completely. Just for a second. A small fracture. That night, when I stood by the window again, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge wasn't my goal anymore. Not really. What I wanted now was exposure. Full visibility. Complete collapse of illusion. Because Adrian didn't just cheat on me. He built a life that depended on me, never looking too closely. And I had looked. Too closely. Behind me, he slept, unaware that the system he trusted had already started leaking from the inside. And the person he underestimated most was no longer reacting. She was preparing. The morning everything ended looked exactly like every other morning. That was the cruelest part of it. The sky was soft and pale, the city already awake, the sound of traffic rising like a distant ocean. From the 12th floor, the world below looked normal, people rushing, cars moving, lives continuing as if nothing was about to break. Inside the apartment, Adrian was tying his watch. The same watch I had gifted him on our 3rd anniversary. He looked calm, controlled, almost satisfied with himself, like a man who still believed the story he was living in was stable. I stood near the kitchen counter, holding a cup of untouched coffee. One cup, like the first day, but now it meant something completely different. He glanced at me. "You're quiet again," he said lightly. Still thinking about patterns? I smiled faintly. No, I replied. I'm done thinking. That made him pause. Just for a second. But I saw it. That small shift in him, the instinctive alertness of a man who senses a trap but doesn't know where it is. He kissed my forehead before leaving. Same gesture. Same routine. But this time, I didn't close my eyes when he did it. I looked at him, and I let him see that I was looking back. The moment the door closed, I moved. Not fast, not panicked, deliberate, like someone who had already rehearsed every step. I opened my laptop, and I sent one file. Not to him, not to Celeste, to everyone who mattered inside his world. Board members, compliance officers, internal audit heads, external regulators, the entire hidden architecture he thought was invisible. All of it, exposed. The first reaction came within minutes. Then the second. Then the collapse began. Phones started ringing. Emails flooded in. Security protocols triggered. Access logs flagged. And somewhere inside that corporate tower he worshipped, Adrian's name lit up in red. But I didn't stop there. Because exposure alone is not justice. Exposure is only the beginning of consequence. I opened the second file. The one I had prepared quietly for days. Celeste's origin history. Her old firm. The prior scandal. The reconstruction of her system. And most importantly, the proof that she had done it before. Not as a victim, but as a designer. A woman who rebuilt corruption after surviving it. And then taught others how to use it, including Adrian. By the time I finished uploading everything, the system was no longer stable. It was bleeding. Slowly. Publicly. Irreversibly. My phone rang. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered. Silence on the other end. Then her voice. Celeste. Calm, but not untouched anymore. You don't understand what you've done, she said. I walked to the window. The city below still looked peaceful. It looks like I understand perfectly, I replied. A pause. Then her tone changed slightly. Not fear. Not anger. Calculation under pressure. You didn't just expose him, she said. You destabilized a controlled structure. I didn't destabilize it, I said softly. I removed the illusion holding it together. Silence again. Longer this time. Then she said something I didn't expect. He trusted you. I almost laughed. No, I said. He underestimated me. And that was the truth that ended everything. When I hung up, I didn't feel satisfaction. That's what people expect from revenge stories. But real endings don't feel like victory. They feel like silence after a storm that hasn't fully stopped yet. Hours later, the news broke internally first. Then externally, a financial misconduct investigation. Frozen accounts. Suspended operations. Internal raids. Names leaking. Patterns unraveling. And at the center of it all, Adrian Cole. He called me just before noon. This time, his voice wasn't controlled. It wasn't calm. It was fractured. What did you do? He asked. Not angry. Not loud. Just broken confusion. I sat down on the couch. The same couch where we had once planned a future that never existed. I ended what you built, I said softly. You don't understand what's coming, he said quickly. This isn't just about me. I know, I replied. Silence. Then his voice dropped. Did you ever love me? That question stayed in the air longer than anything else. Not because it was emotional, but because it was irrelevant now. I looked out the window. The city still moving. Still unaware of the collapse happening inside its tallest glass tower. I loved a version of you that didn't exist, I said finally. And then I ended the call. By evening, everything was over. Not metaphorically. Structurally. Adrian's accounts frozen. His career suspended. Celeste's network exposed layer by layer as investigators pulled threads she had spent years weaving. And for the first time in a long time, the system did not respond. It failed. Completely. That night, the apartment felt different. Not peaceful. Not chaotic. Empty in a way that felt final. I stood by the window again. But this time, I didn't feel like I was looking at a city full of secrets. I felt like I was looking at something that no longer had power over me. Behind me, nothing moved. No lies left to hear. No patterns left to decode. No illusions left to survive inside. A knock came at the door. I already knew it wouldn't be him. When I opened it, there was no dramatic confrontation. Just silence from the outside world entering mine. A notification. Formal. Legal. The beginning of proceedings. The end of everything he had built. I closed the door again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar. Not revenge. Not sadness. Not anger. Stillness. Because destruction is loud when it begins, but always quiet when it finishes. Later that night, I sat alone in the dim light of the apartment. No second coffee cup. No footsteps in the hallway. No lies breathing beside me. Just me. And the truth. Adrian didn't just cheat once. He built his life on repetition of deception. And I didn't destroy his world out of emotion. I ended it because I finally saw it clearly. A system built on lies doesn't deserve collapse. It demands it. Outside, the city kept moving. Unaware. Unbothered. Unchanged. But inside me, something had closed permanently. Not like a wound. Like a door that would never reopen again.